Welcome to our PHP web course. In this class, we will learn about functions. A function is a block of organized, reusable code that is used to perform a single related action, procedure, or routine. It can be used repeatedly in a program. It will not execute automatically when the page loads because there has to be a call to that function in order for it to be executed. All programming languages work with functions. By using functions, we can make our code more compact and efficient. Functions use the same naming conventions as variables. However, unlike variables, functions are not case sensitive. I would urge you to still be consistent in how you work with the case, because it does not look professional using different case structures in different locations for the same function. We create a function by using the function keyword, followed by the name of the function and 2 parentheses, followed by curly braces. The statements to be executed when that function is called are placed inside those curly braces. The function is called when PHP reads the name of the function somewhere in the code. So here's a very easy way to start working with a function. Just make it echo a hello world statement. Here I have a function. The name of the function is say hello. Inside the curly braces, the echo statement will be executed when the function is called. So when PHP reads the name of the function, as shown here, that function will be called and the code inside the curly braces will be executed. The code is not executed until that function is called. Functions can be very handy in allowing us to reuse code. Here I have an example of a function called showLogo, and possibly inside this function we might have some HTML or some other code that we would generate on the top of each page. So rather than coding that function on each page, we can actually put it inside an include, possibly along with other functions we might use, and just call that include on every page. So when the function is called, it will execute. Functions commonly take arguments, also known as parameters. An argument is information to that function which is passed through the argument. The argument is just like a variable, and the arguments are listed inside the parentheses. So the argument would hold a value, and that value would be passed to the function. This is the syntax for a function using an argument. We have the name of the function, and in the parentheses, we have a variable that represents the argument. You can have more than one argument, and they would be comma separated. Somewhere inside the code, you're going to have a statement that will include that argument variable. When the function is called, some value will be passed to it. So the value being passed to it is assigned to that variable, which is the argument. So wherever that variable exists inside the code, it will be replaced with that value being passed to the function. Here I have an example of a function using an argument. So the name of the function is welcome MSG for message, and it takes one argument, $name. So that is the variable that will hold a value. Inside the curly braces, we have an echo statement. It's a simple paragraph that contains the word welcome and then the variable $name. So you can assume that we're going to be welcoming somebody. When I call the function the first time, welcome MSG, and I pass it the value of Teresa, notice that is a string, so it needs to be in quotes. It is passed to the function, and the argument $name now holds the value of Teresa, so in the echo statement, where we have the variable $name, it will hold the value of Teresa, and you can see on the right-hand side the result that you would see in the web page. I can use that function again, and now I can say welcome to Jose. So we can pass the value Jose to the function. The variable $name assumes the value of Jose. That value is transferred down into the curly braces, and we see the result here in the web page. You can assign a default argument when you're creating a function with an argument. Here in my function, welcome MSG, I have the argument $name, but I have it set to the value of Teresa. Now inside the curly braces, I am only using the variable $name. So I am calling that function twice. The first time I do not have any value being passed to the function, therefore it will use the default value of Teresa, and as you can see, it does say welcome Teresa. The second time I call the function, I am passing it the value of Jose. So now the variable $name holds the value of Jose, and as you can see on the right in the web page, indeed it does say welcome Jose. A function can also return a value. Let's take a look at this example. Here I have a function called add numbers. And this function takes two arguments, $num1, $num2. Inside the curly braces, I have the return statement. Following return, I have $num1 plus $num2. So I will be adding these numbers, and that function will return the value there. In the first echo statement, I am calling the add numbers function. I am passing it two values, 5, 10. Notice these are numbers, so we do not need to have them inside quotations. So the 5 will be passed to the first argument, $num1. The 10 will be passed to the second argument, $num2. Those values will be passed down into the curly braces, and they will be added. 5 plus 10 is 15, and you can see the result here in the web page. We will also call that function a second time. Now we are adding the numbers 100 and 200. So 100 is passed to $num1, 200 is passed to $num2. Those values are passed down into the statements inside the curly braces. They are added, and as you can see in the web page, the result is 300. If you have programmed in a language such as Java or C# or another higher level programming language, whenever you work with variables or functions, you typically will declare a data type that is being used for those variables. New in PHP 7, we have what is called the strict requirement, which will allow us to do that. You don't have to do that, but it does exist as of PHP 7. We first have to have our declaration as shown here. And now when we set the arguments, we have to place the data type in front of those arguments. If you pass the values to those arguments that may have a different data type, you will get an error. This helps us to make sure that our function is executing correctly because we are accepting only the right type of data. Let's revisit our add numbers function. And we are not using the strict requirement here. If I were to pass the number 200 enclosed in quotes, which is technically a string, my function would still run. It would still work. However, technically, that is not a real number, but because PHP is what is called a loosely typed language, it will try to convert it into a number. Now, if I were trying to do this using the strict requirement, you will see that the first function will run, but the second function does not, and I see a fatal error message here. Here is an example of using a function with form data. Supposing we were retrieving values from a text box, suppose we wanted to trim any spaces on the right or left of the value, and we also wanted to use the HTML special chars function to convert any possible HTML characters into HTML entities. And we are storing that value in a variable here. If we had a lot of text boxes, we would be doing a lot of writing. So whenever you find yourself repeating the same code over and over again, you want to ask yourself, is there a more efficient way of doing this? The answer is probably yes, and the answer is probably to use a function. So here we have a function called test_input, and it accepts one argument, $data. So we're going to pass a value to that variable. We are going to execute the trim function on that variable and store that value back into the variable. Then we will execute the HTML special chars function on that variable, store the value back into that variable, and return the new value of that variable. Here is the function call, the name of the function, and the variable that will be passing into it, $_post, and then the name of the form element. This is much easier to write than the above. So this is a very useful example of using a function. PHP variables have what is called scope. Scope refers to the part of the script where the variable can be referenced or used. Up to this point, everything has been essentially global scope because we haven't used any functions yet. When variables are created and accessed inside a function, they are said to have local scope, meaning they are only available inside that function. When they are accessed and created outside that function, they have global scope and are available anywhere outside of that function. We have already worked with some PHP super global variables, meaning they can be accessed anywhere, outside of a function or inside of a function. We haven't looked at the $globals array. The $globals super variable allows us to enable a function level variable to have global scope. All we need to do is to use the word global in front of that variable, and that variable can now be accessed not only inside but outside that function.